In a hurting world full of hurting people, folks are desperately looking for personal fulfillment and joy. Do we have what it takes to point them to the source of all joy? We'll talk about that tonight, so please stay with us. Thank you, and welcome. I'm Father Mitch, and this show, EWTN Live, is where we bring you guests from all over the world. Before we get to our guests, I want to mention that today is the feast of the Apostle, Saint Matthias. If you heard the readings today, you know that because Judas Iscariot killed himself, and the apostles had a sense that Jesus had established a new Israel. So they wanted a 12th apostle to continue the idea of being parallel to the 12 patriarchs of Israel. And Matthias was chosen by Lot because he had been with the Lord as a disciple from the very beginning. And it said, there's a little confusion about where he did his missionary work. Some say Ethiopia, but it's more likely that he went up to Georgia. The country of Georgia, not the United States, but the country of Georgia. And there he was martyred. All right, today we have a guest to help us look beyond the self-focused, self-help, self-centered sometimes section of your neighborhood bookstore or even the online retailers, so that he can offer some real answers to the lack of satisfaction, joy, and fulfillment that we all experience in life at one time or another. He believes that the breakthrough for personal roadblock of self-despair is an enlightened spirituality driven by faith in the Lord Jesus. He's the author of a new book called A Travel Guide to Life, Transforming Yourself from Head to Soul. And he's also the host of a new EWTN television miniseries of the same name. Please welcome Mr. Anthony DeStefano. Anthony,
Father,
welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we like to describe people as come from all over the world. Where are you from?
Well, I'm from New York, and most of your viewers will be able to figure that out after about 3 seconds.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Yeah.
It's welcome to have you here, and it's a joy. I was able to read your book this past Friday, and it's very interesting because you are doing something that is really important part of our culture. The self-help books are really scratching an itch that a lot of people have. Sometimes I suspect because of, problems with their upbringing, lack of contact with parents, and all sorts of other things. But you are taking a new twist. Tell us how you wrote, why you wrote this, and what it is you want to add to that whole genre.
That's a great question. The truth of the matter is, there are a lot of people out there that are suffering. I mean, look around you. So many people are suffering, and it's not just that we live in a modern age, and this particular modern age is prone to have more suffering. It is. But that's been true for forever. To live is to suffer. And people are always struggling to find ways to achieve happiness, let's say. And so this self-help industry that's out there, and it's a big industry.
It's huge.
Is scratching an itch. And I myself have made use of self-help books over the years. I've always been interested in self-improvement, and I've always been disappointed though, because I find that when I read a self-help book or watch a self-help program or listen to a self-help tape, it helps for a while. You know, I get all enthusiastic and energized, but then after a while you just sort of slide back, and it's sort of like another phase, you know? And
let me add too, one of the things that I noticed, because I did a lot of studying of the New Age movement, and as I listened to some of the self-help people, they mostly avoided religion. But when they did, they tended to touch into a little bit more New Age approach, something that would be neutral towards Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and all that, but just a little what they call spiritual without being religious.
Well, that's an understatement. You're being very diplomatic and kind there, but that's the truth. And that's the main reason why I wrote this book, because the self-help movement is much too much about self-help and not about God's help at all. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Even the best of these self-help gurus, the ones who, and some of them really do help people. I mean, some of the programs really are effective. They do shy away from anything to do with God and religion. You know, nobody wants to appear like a religious fanatic, God forbid. And they want to appeal to as many people as possible. But then they wind up, you know, committing it's a tragic flaw of the whole movement, because then what happens when life hits you with a 2x4? What happens when something really tragic happens? All of those nice self-help tools, they just fail. It just breaks down completely. That's why these self-help programs, they work for a while, but then they just fall flat. So I wanted to write something that made use of the effective parts of the self-help industry, but at the same time infused it with traditional Orthodox Christian moral teaching.
Yeah, what I sensed is that they were able to do a certain reparative kind of work. A lot of folks don't know basics. Say something like Tony Robbins is very famous about how you set goals. Zig Ziglar was like that.
Right.
How do you set goals for yourself? And a lot of people don't know how to set about simple things. They never learned it at home or school. But there's always that spiritual component that's missing. They got the psychological, but they don't have the spiritual, and there's something
missing.
Thin soup.
You know, there's so many things we could say about this. And first of all, there's a lot of things. You mentioned Tony Robbins. A lot of things about Tony Robbins that are terrific. He even endorsed this book, believe it or not.
No,
you know?
I saw that, and he's very good.
Yeah, and he's Christian, but he does shy away from that. You know, first of all, it breaks down the self-help principles, because when life is really tough, and life gets tough for everybody, the self-help techniques, you know, goal setting just doesn't help you, you know, when you've been diagnosed with cancer, let's say. I mean, you know,
when a child dies.
It just doesn't work. But, you know, there's another point, too, that's very interesting. The self-help movement it's really devoid of any kind of moral compass. And so, you know, what happens is, and I've used this, it's an extreme example, but if let's say, and this is a very extreme example, I hope nobody gets offended, but if somebody as evil as Adolf Hitler were to take a self-help course, you know, they wouldn't become virtuous, they wouldn't stop all their evil deeds, they would just become a more effective, more efficient version of their monstrous self. You know, and in doing that, they would still be unhappy, because you can't be happy and be going against God so much. So that's a big problem with the personal development movement.
Right. It provides you with certain tools.
Yes.
But it does not give direction for the whole of the meaning of life. Whereas you are really addressing that issue.
I try to take what's good in the personal development movement, and there's an awful lot of good. I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging it, because I've benefited greatly. There's so many different techniques about problem solving and about goal setting and about the connection between, say, motion and moving and in emotion. You know, there's so many good things, but then they miss that. It's like a tremendous blind spot they have. And they disregard God, and so I wanted to write a book that combined those two, and hopefully would be able to teach people these effective tools to dealing with life's problems, but also have some kind of lasting value, some meaningful value that went beyond just a phase.
Now, you're absolutely right. And again, they give tools, but not the ultimate goal. What are the steps you like to take in your book? And what are the steps you're trying, because you really do a great job in this book of putting it into small, bite-sized chunks for a person to take step by step by step. What's your general thrust?
Well, you know, first of all, I'm glad you noticed that they were small chapters, because Hemingway said that, you know, writing is not interior design, it's architecture. In other words, there's got to be a structure. And in a book like this that tries to really help people, you want to try to get people to build momentum. And so I purposely had small chapters, manageable chapters. There's about 24 of these chapters, but some of the things I recommend are very hard to do, but they're all simple to understand. And if you follow it in that chronological order that I've set out, I believe it will start the steamroller moving and really give you a lot of momentum. But if I had to sum up all 24 chapters, let's say, I would say there were 5 very important points to go over. And this is the kind of thing that I tell people when they ask me, you know, on the street. They say I don't know if you've had this experience, but because I've written some books, people think that, you know, you're smarter than you actually are. And so they ask you all kinds of questions about problems they're having. What I say, there's 5 things. First of all, most importantly, you got to put God first. That's the first thing. Avoid the big mistake of the personal development movement. Put God first. And that even means when you get up in the morning, put him first. Say when you're still half sleeping, half groggy, you know, say a quick prayer to God, something very quick. You know, thank you, God, for giving me this morning. You know, help me to do your will today.
And, you know, one of the great gifts that we have as a Catholic Church is the prayer called the morning offering.
Exactly.
Where you just say, you know, I offer you my whole day.
Yeah.
You know, in union with all the masses around the world, so that you get that vision of being focused on God with everybody else in the church.
Yes. You plug yourself into that incredible power source, the source of all the power, of all the creativity in the universe. Do that first. Now, you were speaking about Catholics. My goodness, what that means putting God first if you're a Catholic, it means start living a sacramental life. I mean, you know, so many Catholics are not going to Mass, they're not going to confession, they're not praying, they're not fasting, they're not, you know, they're not saying the rosary.
Yeah, they don't know much about the Blessed Mother, the saints.
You know, one of my favorite quotes from G.K. Chesterton is that he said that it's not that the Christian ideal has been tried and found wanting. It's that it's been found difficult and left untried.
Right.
And that's exactly what we have today. People complain all the time about how difficult a time they're having, and meanwhile they're not making use of the spiritual tools and weapons that we've been given. So putting God first means start taking that Catholicism seriously. Put God first. The second thing, and tell me if I'm going too slow. The second thing is a personal development rule, which is that motion is tied to emotion. If you're having difficult problems, you got to get off your keister and start moving a little bit. People live these sedentary lives. They're so lethargic, and the windup is they become depressed, and they don't realize that motion, any kind of motion, is invigorating.
I mean, being a couch potato in front of the television is not a very fulfilling prospect for everybody.
Not only is it not fulfilling, but it'll actually kill you. I mean, it saps you of all your energy. If you want to have energy, you've got to expend energy. You know, we are human beings. We're not just you know, matter, and we're not just spirit like the angels. So you've got to do all of it. You've got to take care of your body. And I'm not talking about any kind of big physical fitness routines or any kind of crazy radical things. I'm talking about, you know, 3 times a week, 30 to 60 minutes of light aerobic type of activity, whether it's jogging or swimming or cycling or just getting out. If you do that for a few weeks in a row, you're going to see that your whole outlook is invigorated. It's going to be like taking off dark glasses and seeing bright light. Just do it for a few weeks, and you'll see that your whole attitude towards problem solving is going to change.
See, and that's what I mean by you chunking it down. You're not saying, commit yourself for the rest of your life. No, make an experiment. Start it 1 week at a time, and then 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and just keep going so that you realize over time. But put it into small commitment chunks.
And that's exactly the third point I tell people. You got to harness that power of momentum. Momentum is key. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to solve all your problems. That's what happens. People get overwhelmed by all their problems, and it paralyzes them. They can't do anything. And what happens usually, unfortunately, is that at some point things get so bad, the pressure just builds so much that there's going to be an explosion. And so people have to take action. But that's a lousy way to live. It's so much easier to harness this power of momentum. Do small things, but do them, consistently. Look at all the areas of your life: finances, relationships, your health, all of the things that need improvement. And do some little things every single day, but do them consistently. Do them for a few weeks, and you know what's going to happen? You're going to speed up. You're going to pick up momentum. We all know this. The first trip to the gym is the hardest. You have to force yourself to go. The second trip may be a little bit easier. The third trip, a little bit easier. The fourth trip, you're raring to go. If there's a hurricane outside, you're still going to go. Nothing can stop you from going. Use that power of momentum. Don't be afraid of small things. And this has got a very big spiritual dimension because, as you know, our Lord started small. When he saved humanity, he became a baby. He became an embryo in Our Lady's womb. He didn't just snap his fingers and everything. He became one of us and started very small. Do not despise small beginnings, the Bible says. So if God uses that strategy, why shouldn't we?
Yeah, and that really stands in contrast to the pagan myths where the gods would appear in human form all of a sudden, full grown, and always work mischief. It's a very different thing. They always are killing somebody, raping somebody, stealing things. But when Christ, takes on flesh, like you say, starts off tiniest and then grows into a man.
Exactly. And the fourth thing I would say has to do with another thing you said before: goal setting. Goal setting is something that the personal development movement does very well. But it really comes from a very Christian principle, which is that self-improvement precedes any kind of great accomplishment, including the accomplishment of great happiness. Things don't just fall into our laps. We have to improve. We work on ourselves first. You become attractive, and then you will attract other people to you. We're always trying to change the behavior of the people around us, trying to change the behavior of our husband or our wife or our boss at work, and it rarely works. It's so much better to just work on yourself. Be the best family man, be the best employee, and then God will start working miracles in your life.
If my wife only got this done, I'd be happy. Or if I only had $1 million, I'd be happy. That's just nonsense.
The if-only syndrome, if only I had this, then I'd be happy. We know that's nonsense. It doesn't work.
As a matter of fact, isn't it something like 2/3 of the people who win lotteries end up going bankrupt?
Sure.
Because if you just get it plopped down without going through these steps, you're overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how rich you are. It goes back to what we said earlier about it's not about success, it's not about achievement. You can, and this has to do with our goal setting too, which is that if you want to achieve goals, you have to get goals that motivate you. You have to get goals that inspire you.
Yes.
So many things in life are conspiring against us. So many, there's a force of gravity, pulling us down. And it's not just concupiscence, although it does go back to the fall of man. This fall, there's so many things that are working against us. You gotta love what you're trying to do. You have to really be motivated about them. But even if you are and you achieve those great goals, they could be the wrong goals. They could be things that you weren't supposed to achieve, And that's the reason why so many of these Hollywood movie stars sometimes, or these, you see tragic stories of people killing themselves, and and how could they possibly kill themselves when they've achieved all their goals? It's because they weren't taking into account God's will. They were just thinking about what they wanted.
And sometimes, I recently read a book by someone who converted from a life working in porn movies, and he just saw his friends dying all over the place, and he almost died himself. And so, this is the kind of thing where, it becomes, something destructive until in this case, he did find God's help, but it was at almost the very end of his life. And he again describes all these other people who were so self-destructive, and because he said, I don't want God telling me what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course God has heard this before. He's seen us do this 1,000,000 times. There's no sin that he hasn't seen everybody commit. And he'll help you even at the end, of course, if you turn around. But he doesn't give you back all those wasted years. I mean, people waste just whole decades of their life. And sure, it's wonderful that they turn around at the end, but what about all that time? What about the time you lost with your family? So one of the things and purpose of my book, I hope, is to save people time. And the fifth thing I would say, though, is, and this goes away from now the personal development movement and back to Christianity, is to exercise true love. Now, when I say true love, I don't mean the love that Hollywood teaches or the love that the world teaches. As Father Frank always says, you know, love is the most misused, abused, confused word in the English language. Real love is the love that Christ taught the night before he was crucified. This is my body given up for you. It's sacrificial. It gives to the point of death. When you exercise that kind of love, that's when God starts really working miracles in your life. So I tell people who are suffering sometimes, you know, go out and find somebody suffering worse than you. You know, sometimes they're right in front of your eyes in your house, you know, in your family and your friends. But if not, then go, you know, volunteer at a hospital or a hospice. You know, I don't care what your problems are or how much you're suffering, go out and find somebody suffering more than you and help them. Yeah. You know, if you do those 5 things, what I've just said right there are 5 keys in the, I mean, that's like personal development 101. It's the kind of stuff that guys like Tony Robbins teach and teach effectively. But what I've done there is I've infused that, I've supercharged it with the power of grace. You know, you connect that to the power of God and Christ. And you do those 5 things for a couple of weeks, just a couple of weeks, and then you'll see what happens. You'll see what happens at the end of 2 weeks. Your whole outlook is going to be changed, and you're going to be able to deal with all the specific problems that come your way in a much more effective and powerful way.
Yeah, this is something that one of the things I liked about it's the kind of book that I could recognize some friends who really could use that. It would be something just to open up vistas that they get so caught in the pain of the world and the smallness of the world and the lack of direction and goals of the world they live in that they can't see beyond their nose. Whereas this opens up all kinds of vistas for personal growth. It's
people get caught up in their bills and their problems, and it really paralyzes them. And it's happened to me too. You know, it's happened to everybody I know, and it's hard to break out of that paralysis. It's really hard. So the way I wrote this book, and you know, it's my other books, Travel Guide to Heaven and 10 Prayers God Always Says Yes To, the tone of them are, I'm not going to say folksy, but all my books are conversational, but they're more kind of nice, the tone, more friendly. This one is more of a tough love type of tone, especially at the beginning.
This is Brooklyn coming out of
a little bit, yeah, a little bit. And I'm hoping, though, that people don't hold that against me. I mean, I don't really, on some level, it doesn't matter. I'd rather people get helped than that they like me. But I hope they don't hold that against me, and I hope that they'll realize that I'm trying to not quite hit them with a 2x4, but nudge them a little. You know, there's something called the Law of Inertia from physics, which means that, you know, an object at rest tends to stay at rest. And so many of us, and that concept has applications way outside of physics. So many of us are at rest, and we tend to stay at rest. We don't want to take care of our bill problems or our debt or our relationship problems. Sometimes you just have to be nudged by a tough coach, and that's the point of this book.
You know, it's something that might be a good way to put the challenge is the way most Marines talk. They'll claim a Marine gets more done by 9 in the morning than most people get done all day long.
Yeah.
And that should be a challenge. You know, if the Marines can get all that done out of the patriotism and love of the Marine Corps, then how much more should we be doing for love of God and His people?
You know, I find in my own personal life, I don't know everybody else, but when I'm really doing good, when I'm living a sacramental life, when I'm going to daily Mass, let's say, and I'm saying the rosary every day, and I'm praying, and I'm fasting, because people forget about fasting, and I'm reading Scripture, and I'm exercising, when the thrusters are full, you know, blast, I can't believe how much I get accomplished by, you know, lunchtime. And I do it without ever feeling tired. It's just amazing, you know, what you can do when you use all the tools that God has given us, you know?
Right. And this is, you know, something that is very important that you keep all of these elements in balance. See, that's another side of your book, is that you're saying do all of this, don't just do one, but it's balance and integration of all, the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual all fit together. And that's one of the things I liked about it.
Father, I was just thinking this morning that you're a great example of that, what you just said, in a positive way, because yes, I include a chapter there about the body, the mind, and the spirit all being integrated, and you can't just lose weight and expect to be happy. You can't just make money and expect to be happy. You just can't study and expect to be happy. You can't even just pray and expect to be happy. We have bodies and we have souls, and we have to nourish all of them. And I was thinking about you, because I know that here it is, you're a scripture scholar and you write books, and you're the host of a TV show and all of that. But I also happen to know that you like to be outside in the wilderness, and you go out and you're a very vigorous man. And I was thinking, imagine how Father Mitch would be if he didn't do that. If he just stayed inside in a room, and would your books be as good? Would you be as effective at what you do here? There's something about being outside and taking that. Yet we have no choice but to take a full person approach to everything.
See, I think I would end up being even more ornery than I already am.
I hope not.
Exactly. So yeah, this is something that
yes,
all of us need to have that sense of integration.
You got to work on everything. You can't just do, and that's what people in our society do. They binge. We're a society of bingers. We spend thousands of dollars on, vitamins and minerals and this. And like G.K. Chesterton once said again about, if you start worshiping nature in the form of your own body, you actually become unnatural.
Yes.
So you got to do it. You got to look at the whole picture. And that's, educating your mind, nourishing your spirit, working on your body, and always putting God first. If you do those things, God is going to help you out. He's going to really help you out of your problems. And while I have written a book that's sort of like, I don't put quite a Marine regiment or anything like that, I really try to make it manageable, doable steps. And even at the beginning of the book, the chapters are shorter. And I move on to longer chapters. And I tried to take the same approach with the mini-series that we did. Same approach, sort of like a coach.
Cool. Well, we need to take a break, but first of all, I want to make sure that y'all tune in to Anthony's mini-series. Now, that's going to premiere next week, beginning on Monday. What is that? May 19th. May 19th. So Monday, May 19th, it'll be here on EWTN at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And it'll be every day,
every single day for 6 days in a row.
6 days in a row, from Monday into the weekend. So we urge you to take a look at that and check some of those out. And we're going to take a little break right now. We want to get your questions and your comments as well as those of our studio audience, so please stay with us. Thank you very much, and welcome back. First of all, I want to invite any of you to do what these nice folks have done. Come down here for a pilgrimage. You can call our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966, or you can go on the internet to EWTN.com. And one of the things that they'll do is give you the scheduling of masses, programs you can attend, and tours of the studios. They give you directions up to Hansville to go to the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament. And they'll let you know places you can stay and eat. Matter of fact, Anthony and I went down to one of our religiously themed restaurants. We had some barbecue over at Golden Rule.
Great.
See, you like that?
I loved it. I loved it.
Matter of fact, he wants them to open up one in New York City.
That's right.
I just don't think we can get those Alabama folks up there. But it's a good idea because they do a good job. All right, ready for some questions?
I guess so.
Let's start off with a caller. Hello, John.
Hello, Father Mitch and guest.
How you doing?
Pretty good today. I hope you're doing well, too.
Yes, sir. And your question?
I actually have two. When people are trying to problem solve, most people I know would pray, but if you're just simply praying and you're not getting the motivation, you know, or you want to have God number one. You want him to be very involved with the problem solving. And then the second question is, both of you are probably familiar with St. John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul, that type of thing. How can you problem solve when things seem to be really besetting you and you don't know what the Lord wants? And I'll hang up.
Thank you, John. So let's take the first question first.
About problem solving. Yes.
And prayer.
And prayer. Well, let's talk about problem solving for a second. This is where the personal development movement can be very helpful, because one of the things the personal development movement taught me is that you really need to spend only 20% of your time thinking about the problem itself. You need to spend 80% of your time working on how to solve the problem. You use that good old 80-20 rule. Most people do the reverse. Most people spend only 20% of the time trying to fix the problem. They spend 80% of the time fixating on the problem, focusing on it, saying, woe is me, how terrible. They play the tape over and over again, and it paralyzes them. You got to get out of that mindset. Mm-hmm. Now, prayer can help you to do that. But what overly spiritual people sometimes think is that, well, all I have to do is pray. And that's wrong, okay? Prayer and action is the rule. Jesus Christ, when he saved the world, he prayed a lot, but he didn't just pray. He was always going out, healing people, preaching. He worked. You have to pray and work. And so when you pray, when you have a problem, don't be surprised if God doesn't pick you up and throw you into the arena. He's going to help you. He's going to give you the wisdom necessary to solve the problem, but you got to do both, and you have to make use of some of those good personal development principles.
And like there's an old story of a woman who was, praying and praying, Lord, I've got to take care of these bills. Please help me win the lottery. Please help me. And she just complained after a few years, Lord, you never helped me win the lottery. And the Lord said back, but I told you a long time ago, you got to buy a ticket. So, you can't just sort of say, well, you just take care of it all.
There's so many cliches. God helps those who help themselves. But they're cliches for a reason, because they're true, So yes, prayer and work, that's the combination that you always aim for. As far as the second question about St. John of the Cross, I assume he's talking about dark night of the soul.
But also
spiritual.
Other kinds of suffering and great difficulties people have. And not just the usual little problems, but
it's such a big question. First of all, in terms of the spiritual dryness, if anybody out there has experienced that, Mother Teresa had a tremendous problem with spiritual dryness, but that didn't stop her from having faith. Because faith is a decision. It's not just it's not an emotion. If the emotions are there, fine. But emotions go up and down like a roller coaster in your life. You can't base the most important things in your life on what amount to a ride. Okay, so you have to always remember that your faith in God and how you conduct yourself and your religion and your life is a decision, and it's an act of the will. As far as real suffering goes, You know, I learned a lot listening to your programs, and just, you know, one of the things, when you come right down to it, Father, the personal development movement can help you figure out how to deal with life's frustrations and irritations, but when something really bad happens, when you're really afraid of cancer or somebody, or bankruptcy or something like that, the only thing that matters is trust. Radical abandonment to the will of God. You know, fear is useless. What's required is trust. You got to just keep saying, Jesus, I trust you. Jesus, I trust you. Even if you say it 1,000,000 times, it doesn't matter. Say it, you know, when you wake up, during the day, when you go to sleep. Just show that trust, and God will help you more. The more you trust, the more He'll help you with that problem.
All right. We have a question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
From Aquantico, Wisconsin.
Great. Good to have you here.
Great to be here. A lot warmer down here than home.
Yeah.
My question is, in this age of political correctness, and it seems to be so rampant in our society today, do you feel that has held back or caused many of these other motivational people to avoid the area of spirituality?
And by, you know, do you have something in mind with that?
Well, when you look at the different books that the famous motivational people have put out,
Sure.
they never seem to really address the area of God and spirituality. And I guess I'm just wondering, do you feel that's because of their fear of offending somebody because of the political correctness part?
Okay,
absolutely. The answer is yes. You know, it's not the only reason. Some of the reason is that a lot of these guys just don't believe in the Christian God. They just don't really, they really are new agey. And like the whole age, they, like the rest of us in society, not us, but like the rest of people in society, you know, they're still searching for some kind of legitimate spirituality, but they've lost faith in Christianity, or it's too hard for them, you know, all those annoying thou shalt nots. And so a lot of these motivational speakers just are too new agey themselves. But the ones that are Christian, I do think there's been a chilling effect by the society. They're so afraid that people are going to think they're religious fanatics. And there's really some of them are good. You know, like Tony Robbins, again, you know, he speaks about the Creator all the time. You know, he himself, I think, is careful. He doesn't talk about Christianity too much, but he acknowledges a personal God. And he speaks about that a lot. He's better than most of these other guys. I think the only way for us to address that problem is for Christians and Catholics especially to stand up more and to show the public in the public forum and show that you know, we're the majority. And so if you want to be out there talking about personal development, there's nothing wrong with speaking openly about God. I try to do that myself. You know, I get invited onto a lot of these secular programs, and you know, nothing happens to me. A lightning bolt doesn't strike me when I start talking about the rosary.
Well, what about the host of the show? Does he strike you?
You know, a lot of times, they probably would like to, but you know what? They don't. You'd be surprised if you're bold. You know, the spirit, you know, what does Timothy say? The spirit that God has given us is not a cowardly spirit. If you're really bold and you go in and you're sincere, a lot of these guys, they believe it too. They're just too afraid themselves to say anything. And once you show them that nothing bad's going to happen, the roof's not going to fall down, you know, they're fine with it.
And I think part of the issue with the political correctness question is that today there are some immoral actions that are they're popular now. For instance, racism is something that it's popular to condemn, as it should have been all along. But other areas, especially sexual misconduct, abortion, and all that is something, you better not talk about that. And so the politically correct says, yes, we stand firmly, finally, against racism. But on these other issues, we let it slide. You know, that also keeps some people quiet.
Father, though, you know, this really is interesting because it really shows what hypocrites some of those people in the general public and in the secular world really are, because they're always criticizing us for guilt. Christian guilt, Catholic guilt, Irish guilt, Polish guilt, Italian guilt. They're always so, concerned about the guilt we got. But they're so full of baloney. They don't care at all about the guilt. You can't have a society with rules or any kind of code of conduct without guilt if you break those rules, if you break that code. There are rules in marriage, there are rules in friendship, there are rules in TV. If you break them, you're going to feel guilty sometimes. Hollywood and the world, they don't care a little bit about the guilt. All they care about is the code of conduct, the Christian code of conduct. What you just said is so true. Try go breaking one of their rules. Try go being an actor in Hollywood and attend a pro-life march. Try talking about prayer. You'll see how quick you win an Academy Award. No. You're going to be ostracized from the whole community unless you say mea culpa, and you express tremendous guilt.
As a matter of fact, it's so interesting to me to hear how they look to the directors, actors, producers who were on the blacklist of the 1950s and the McCarthy era. But they've just created a new set of blacklists of those who hold principles like being pro-life and rejecting abortion. So.
Well, we can't let them get away with it. We got to call them on the carpet for it.
Okay. We got a caller on there. Hello, James.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Good to have you. And your question?
Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta's approach to life was joy. Put Jesus first, others second, yourself third. That's the J-O-Y. Then you have joy. How does that fit into personal development, and shouldn't that be our true motivation? Thank you.
Thank you, James.
It fits in where this is the whole point of my book right there, that you need to put God first. God's got to be first. Everything else comes second. Everything else comes second. Simple as that. So there's not much I can say about it. That's the whole point of the book. That's the whole point of the mini-series.
Yeah. So you end up agreeing with Blessed Mother Teresa.
That in what particular?
About putting Jesus first, others second, and yourself third.
Absolutely, because, that we were talking about love before. True love is giving yourself away to others. Mm-hmm. So of course, Jesus is God, you put him first, you give yourself away to others, exercise true love, and then you worry about yourself, and then God is going to worry about you and show you, and then you'll start seeing miracles in your life.
Yep.
So absolutely.
Yep. I have another question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm from Birmingham here.
And your question?
Okay, do you have anything in your book to help people who have left the church?
I try to be very, maybe I shouldn't say this on the air, I try to be very foxy and clever. I don't say, okay, this book or this chapter is for people who have left the church. But the whole book is really written with that in mind. My audience, when I sit down and I write. So
you just blew your cover.
Well, the audience probably may not be watching this telecast.
Right.
Maybe someday after they read the book, hopefully they'll tune in.
Right.
But the whole idea is that I try to, you could just tell from the way I am on this program, I'm not really the preacher type, I'm more like been working in the pro-life movement and being a business guy, and I like to think I'm a straight shooter, and I'm not so articulate. I flub a lot. And in my books, I try to, have the same kind of conversational tone. And I don't try to hit people over the head right away. I don't start preaching at them right away. You get to the end of the book, and there will have been a lot of preaching, But, it starts out, at least I hope it seems very common sense, very practical. And the idea, though, is once you've read it, if you have fallen away, I think what you'll get from it is, that makes sense. That's okay. Well, what, maybe I should.
Matter of fact, I think that's exactly a right description. You start off with some basic, common sense human issues, and then you take it step by step to, you have to deal with the next step, or you're going to be stymied. You're not going to grow. So the next step will be spiritual.
Yes.
But you do start off with very natural, easy steps. Anybody who has a need for the self-help books could start off in it, but then you take them beyond.
Another thing about just what you're saying, and it relates to people who have fallen away, is, and why this book is a travel guide, let's say, and not, it's not some doctoral dissertation. I don't spend 100 pages trying to prove, the nature of the Trinity or something like that. The proof of this, I do have arguments in this book, and I try to make it compelling and persuasive, but the proof of this book is in the results. That's the proof, and I say that right up front. So I'm hopeful that if you're someone who's sort of fallen away a little bit, and yet, you're unhappy, and you see a book like this, and you say, that's interesting, and you start reading it, and you start seeing that momentum build, and you start seeing that, this makes sense, and you start seeing the results, then by the time you get a little bit later in the book, and I start really hitting you with some, heavy stuff about the real meaning of love being, learning the meaning of love at the foot of the cross, let's say, and I start talking more in that vernacular, at that point you will have said, well, all of this stuff worked already, maybe this is right. So that's what I meant earlier when I said about the architecture and the structure of the build is sort of, I've laid it out in such a way with those kind of people in mind. Hope it works.
All right, have another caller. Hello, Lavette.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, where are you from?
I'm from New York.
Great, see, you're somebody from back home. And what's your question?
I have a question. I traveled around the world doing the Tony Robbins program, and I achieved many goals with the wrong moral compass. How do you know when you're in line with God's will while achieving and setting your goals?
Great question, Lavette. I love it.
Great question, and there's not a soundbite answer, but we can talk about it a little bit. Finding God's will, understanding God's will is a process, and it's a discernment. God very rarely hangs out a sign and says, this is what I want you to do. Sometimes he does. But in fact, so it's funny, even when you read the Gospels, you see Jesus, he almost never gives a straight answer. Almost never. You can count on one hand how many times he actually says yes.
Usually he responds to a question with another question.
It's so interesting. Even when the first two apostles met him, and they asked him a simple question, they said, where do you live? You would think he'd give a simple answer, but because he's God, he didn't. He said, come and see. He said, come and see. That's the whole, it seems to me that that's God's strategy with everything. He doesn't want to just give you, he wants to draw you in. And so he wants you to be praying all the time, and he wants you to even make mistakes or stumble. Meanwhile, he's drawing you in, and as you're making your way with goal setting, you're actually you're getting in closer union with him. So don't feel bad if you're not deciphering God's clues exactly. I think though, when it comes to goal setting, first of all, God does put strong desires in our heart when he wants to give us a clue about what our goals should be. Sometimes they're not from God though, and sometimes we do fool ourselves, and that's why you have to really look at whether or not, first of all, whether this desire is sinful. You have to look at whether or not it contradicts your state in life. If you're a married person and you've got a lot of children, and you feel you suddenly have the call to go off and, be a missionary somewhere across the globe, that sounds like, it might be from God. But meanwhile, what's going to happen to your family? Your first priority as a married husband. So you have to, and there are some great books out there that talk about how to discern God's will.
I would, one of the ones I would mention, Lavette, is one I wrote called How to Listen When God is Speaking. You can get it from EWTN religiouscatalog.com. Because it's what you're getting at. One way to summarize it, you need to pay attention to the objective truth God has already revealed. You don't have to discern, should I break into a store and rob it, or does God want me to walk past the store? No, God doesn't want you to be a thief. He commanded you against murder. He commanded you to honor your parents. He commanded you against using his name in vain. He commanded you to go to church. He forbade adultery. It's clear. And you've got objective moral reality that you say that sets the limits of where God's will is going to be.
Yeah.
You also have what God has revealed about himself in terms of who he is, who the Trinity is. You've got that. And then if you look at that as a wall that he puts around, so that within that wall you have this tremendous freedom. Once you establish these objective norms, then you can start to do it personally. The personal development. And that's a very important element. But again, Levette, get a hold of how to listen when God is speaking. That'll sort of lay out some of that and give you some direction on, because it's not something that you do so much of, how to discern the will of God. You're getting with the basics, and this has taken her to that next step.
Exactly. But I will say that if you really know, you know the Tony Robbins stuff, and he's got some very effective stuff there about goal setting, writing them down, looking at them all the time. There are tried and true ways of how to achieve your goals. But if you are putting God first in your life, and if you're a Catholic and you're living a sacramental life, and you're doing all those other things, and you're praying the rosary every day, then I think, and you're reading Father Mitch's book about this, I think that God is going to put, if God doesn't want you to achieve something, he's going to put a big fat obstacle in your way that you will not be able to overcome. And if he does want you to achieve something, you're going to be able to crash through anything.
Right.
So just stick with what you're doing, I think, and that's the recipe for success.
Yeah, and also I would add, in terms of the goal setting, number one goal that everybody needs to set more than anything else, I don't want to go to hell, and I do want to go to heaven. I want to be with God more than anything else for all of eternity, and I do not want to be separated from him, and setting that as the goal under which all other goals have to be set.
It's so important. The only failure, to understand this, the only definitive failure in life is the failure to be a saint, the failure to go to heaven. I talk to people about this. I wrote a book called The Travel Guide to Heaven a few years ago about what heaven is going to be like. And a lot of people come to me, especially when they lose loved ones sometimes, and they ask me. And and nothing, of course, there's no words you can say to console anybody. Time is the only thing that could heal certain wounds, and grace. But I will try to urge them to look at the world with divine lenses, the way God looks at it. And that is that if you're 10 years old and you die in a car accident, it's a tremendous tragedy. But if you go to heaven, then you had a wonderful, successful, beautiful life. If you die at 105 years old and you've got $1 billion in the bank and you're successful and famous, and you go to hell, then you are a miserable failure. Now, it's hard for us to understand that sometimes, but that's the way God looks at the world. So we have to try to adopt that perspective.
Exactly. We have Marie. Hello, Marie.
Yes, for those of us who are bedridden and can't go outside for a walk, can't go out and help people, how do we keep our spirits up? And I'll hang up. Thank you, Marie.
I say this in the book. I talk about health and motion in the book, and I take a few paragraphs to explain. Listen, I know that some people who are listening or reading or watching are handicapped and are bedridden and they can't move around much, and that you have more. Any human being from conception to natural death has more dignity than every single star and planet in the heavens combined. God understands that you can't move around very much. You probably can. To the extent that you can move around, you should, even if it's just moving your arms. I mean, you got to do some kind of emotion. If you can. But if you can't, even that doesn't matter. God sees that. He knows the circumstances, and he's going to utilize you and if you're trying to do God's will, he will allow you to be a tremendous example to anyone who sees you. And if you're trying to follow God's will that way, he'll do it without you moving around, without any energy. So never worry about that.
Something I like to point out to people in your position is that in an automobile, something that's absolutely necessary to get the car started is the battery. But it's not a moving part. It makes it possible for the other parts to get that first impulse to be able to move. And Marie, you and so many other people are there like a battery, not moving, but providing a source of energy so that others can get moving by your prayer, by your offering of yourself as you are, with everything you've got and with who you are. And that as you do that, the power that God gives you in that motionless and bedridden state helps to get those of us who are moving parts to keep going. Without you, we just can't do it. And so that is a very important part. I want to just let people know that you can go to Anthony's website, which is www.anthonydestefano.com. I want to thank you for being with us, and make sure you all tune in to the mini-series premiering next week at EWTN. That's Monday at EWTN at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And may Almighty God bless you and keep you, cause His face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And remember, we can bring you Anthony here and his series because this network is brought to you by you. Please be generous in making it possible by putting us in between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill, and we'll pay our bill.